The problem isn't that you're the technical manager and quality manager at the same time. The problem is that your lab thinks this is solved with a double box on the org chart. Because it's one thing to hold two positions and a very different thing to be able to prove that those two responsibilities are under control. Hi, I'm Oscar Delgado, and today we're going to answer the question that keeps many small labs up at night. Can you be the technical manager and quality manager at the same time? The practical answer is yes, it's possible, but it's not always advisable and it's not always well proven. And this difference is key for labs under ISO/IEC 17025 and also for clinical labs under ISO 15189. Imagine two labs. First, there's the Octopus lab. On the org chart, a single person appears as technical manager, quality manager, purchasing manager, equipment manager, internal auditor, report approver, and, if they're not careful, also in charge of making coffee. Everything is assigned, but when the audit comes and they ask, how do you ensure the independence of this review? Who verifies this person's work? What happens if that person is absent? The lab starts breaking out in a cold sweat. And then there's the Lion lab. They might also have one person with more than one responsibility, but each role is defined, competence is demonstrated, authority is clear, potential conflicts are identified, and there's a backup if that person is away. That lab doesn't blow smoke. That lab demonstrates control. Now imagine this scene. A small lab wants to get accredited. It has a small staff, like many labs in Latin America. So someone says, look, since Carlos knows how to do methods, equipment, uncertainty, audits, and documents, let's make him the technical and quality manager. And at first, it sounds logical. Carlos knows, Carlos answers, Carlos solves. But 3 months later, Carlos is reviewing his own procedures, approving his own changes, evaluating deviations he managed himself, responding to audits, reviewing indicators, signing off on technical decisions, and also dealing with clients. That's no longer efficiency, that's a risk in a white lab coat. That's why I want to give you a simple tool, the double hat test. Before saying yes you can, check 4 things: competence, authority, impartiality, and continuity. Let's go through them one by one. Step 1, competence. The question isn't, does the person hold the title? The right question is, can the person demonstrate competence for each role they've been assigned? Because being great technically doesn't automatically mean you know how to manage a lab system. For example, someone might master method validation, uncertainty, and internal quality controls, but not necessarily know how to handle internal audits, corrective actions, document control, or management review. And it also happens the other way around. Someone might be excellent at organizing documents, but lack the technical judgment to decide if a method is verified, if equipment is fit for its intended use, or if a result is technically valid. Common mistake: confusing experience with demonstrated competence. Actionable step: take the job description and separate competencies by role. One column for technical, another column for quality, and another for evidence. Training, experience, evaluation, authorization, and monitoring. Step 2, authority. A poorly defined dual role creates an uncomfortable question. When this person makes a decision, are they speaking as the technical manager or as the quality manager? It seems like a minor detail, but it's not. If non-conforming work is detected, who decides if the result is withheld repeated, or reported with some clarification. If there's a deviation in a quality control, who evaluates the technical impact? If a procedure isn't followed, who raises the action? If the same person does everything, the lab must explain very well how decisions are made and how they prevent one responsibility from overshadowing the other. Common mistake: putting names on the org chart but not defining real authority. Actionable step: review your responsibility matrix and mark who does, who reviews, who approves, and who replaces. If the same person appears in every column, you have a red flag. Step number 3, impartiality. This is where many labs get it wrong and say, but we're honest. And that's great. But in accreditation, being honest isn't enough. You have to prove that risks to impartiality are well identified and controlled. If the technical manager is also the quality manager, there could be a risk of them evaluating their own work, closing corrective actions on problems they generated themselves, or downplaying a deviation because it affects their own indicators. I'm not saying they're going to do that. I'm saying the lab must identify the risk and define controls. For example, using an alternate auditor for processes where that person has direct responsibility, or having certain critical decisions reviewed by another competent person, or documenting a management review where the workload of roles and potential conflicts are analyzed. Common mistake: saying there's no conflict without having evaluated it. Actionable step: take your impartiality risk matrix and add a row called Dual Technical Quality Role. Evaluate the risk and define real controls. Step 4, continuity. This is the question nobody wants to ask. What happens if that person gets sick, goes on vacation, or resigns? If the lab grinds to a halt because only one person knows how everything works, then you don't have a system. You have dependency. And dependency on a single person is one of the most silent risks in small labs. In ISO/IEC 17025 and ISO 15189, the lab needs to operate consistently. That doesn't happen if everything lives in one person's head. Common mistake: thinking the backup is whoever is available. No. A backup must have competence, authority, and access to the necessary information. Actionable step: define a substitution plan. Who replaces the technical role? Who replaces the quality role? What can each one decide? What records must they review? What activities can't they authorize? Here comes the important twist. You're not evaluated on how many people you have. You're evaluated on whether you can demonstrate control. A small lab can be well organized, and a large lab can be a mess with a fancy org chart. Accreditation doesn't reward pretty structures. It rewards competence, evidence, and consistency. So, can you be the technical manager and quality manager at the same time? Yes, it's possible, but only if the lab demonstrates at a minimum these 4 things: that the person is competent for both roles, that authority is defined, that conflicts and impartiality are controlled, and that there is continuity if that person is away. Now, if you're in a clinical lab under ISO 15189, add an extra layer of care, because there may also be legal, regulatory, or health requirements regarding who can technically direct the lab, sign off on responsibilities, or make certain clinical decisions. So it's not enough to look at the standard. You must also check the applicable regulations in your country. Immediate application for today: open your org chart. Find the person who holds more than one critical position. Now answer these 5 questions. 1. Do they have a job description for each role? 2. Is there evidence of competence for each role? 3. Is it clear what they decide and what they don't decide? 4. Does anyone review their critical decisions? And 5. Is there a competent backup if that person is missing? If you answer no to 2 or more questions, you don't have a control dual role. You have dependency disguised as efficiency. And remember this: it's not about forbidding a person from wearing 2 hats. It's about the lab knowing when they put on each hat, what decisions each one makes, and who verifies that they aren't quietly auditing themselves. If you want to move faster in your lab's accreditation, I invite you to download the free ISO/IEC 17025 templates. The download link is here in the video description and also in the first pinned comment. If you want me to prepare a specific template to review dual roles, backups, responsibilities, and impartiality risks, write double hat in the comments. Subscribe to the channel because here we talk about accreditation without making it more complicated than necessary. See you in the next video.